Okay, we have covered rigs, rig animations, variants, items, and basically creating all of the kind of granular components of a game in AirPig. And today we're going to bring that all together into map editing, which um, really have a lot of features to cover. This is going to be kind of an intense video, but I do want to do it all at once to show how all the pieces fit together in one place. So let's get started. I'm going to open an existing project, and you've seen parts of this project in the last video, and we're going to create a new map and put everything in it. So the first thing we're going to do is just do new map, and this is going to just generate a default size map. I can show the grid. These other things will be going through as we work on different parts of the map. You can also set a background color. I'm going to leave that alone for now, but that's useful if you have like a small map and the camera can see outside of the map borders and you want to match the background to the edges of the map so it looks like one big seamless map. So you can set the background color. In a lot of cases, your camera is never going to see the background, so if you have a big map, the camera won't scroll past the borders, but for small maps you can sometimes see the backgrounds. That just lets you edit that. The next important thing is biomes, and so I'll have some documentation showing how the layout of a biome file works, but they're basically just a ping file with a specific layout, and I have several biomes in here. We'll start with a grass one. I'm ultimately going to make a dungeon, but I'll start with grass to show how you can just change biomes and not have to redesign your map. It saves the geometry of your map. Setting a map song, we'll do that in a minute. Before we play test, and then we'll be getting into tile type. So the first thing that I'm going to do on this map is just fill it with, we're going to fill it with walls. So I'm going to choose wall here and click that to fill. And then we're mostly going to be using this rectangular marquee tool, but there is a pencil tool, the fill bucket, and then the rectangular marquee. So these are the different tile types. None is not really a valid type. You want to avoid using this in the map, but it does need to exist. It does serve a purpose, but for the most part, avoid using none types of tiles. Background is generally like water, or if you have, say, like a floating island, this might be like sky. This is whatever is around the like floor layer. So it could be water, it could be like a void or a pit. And you'll see that, actually I'll demo that in just a second. And then floor and path are fairly self-explanatory, as is wall. So let's go ahead. I like to start with wall because we're ultimately going to make an interior map. So when I'm making an interior map, I like to start with walls and then carve out the rooms. But you could also start with floor and build up the walls, however kind of works for you. We'll start right here. We're going to make a pretty small map. Oh, I'm filling with wall. I need to be filling with floor. So you can see this automatically tiled everything for us. If you've worked in a tool like Tiled or LDTK, you would either have to create your own terrains, manually paint each tile, or set up rule systems. AirPig uses a baked-in rule system for resolving tiles. It's definitely more simple than what you could accomplish with a full-fledged tile editor, but it makes editing maps really, really fast. So we're going to keep this fairly simple. We'll have a little door entrance right here, but you can see if I want to just create more rooms, I can just quickly draw them out. I'll go ahead and show, so path is for like if I wanted to have, you know, a little path through here. What path means is biome dependent. So your biome might have, like if it's in a dungeon, it might be a floor pattern. If it's outside, it's like dirt path, but really this can kind of be whatever you as an artist want path to mean for a specific biome. So now we have a small geometry drawn out. Let me show you what changing biomes does. So we're going from exterior grass to interior castle, and there you can see the path, what that looks like in the castle sense. In dungeons, the path is kind of like a mesh grate. These are just aesthetic choices I made. This is not something like you have to do it this way or anything like that. It's your artistic choice. For interiors, I use paths sometimes as the light pattern. Looks like I have a little bit of messed up tiles there. That's an art fix that I need to make. But so I have a few different biomes here that I've made that just kind of shows you the variety you can get. We're actually going to use dungeon today, and we'll make this all floor for now. And we're going to keep this really small and simple because our goal is not to have an amazing map layout, but rather to show all of the features once you've made your map geometry. So basically just a square room, kind of boring. You can see I have all this extra map over here. I can resize this map really easily. So like, let's say I just want maybe this much space around it. So these are 4s. So that's 16. Looks like I need to remove, the boulder lines are 4 tiles. So I want to remove about 30, let's call it 30 tiles. So this is the resize button, and we're going to remove tiles from the right side, and we're going to remove about 32. I don't have to do this. There's no problem in leaving the map larger. I just don't like all the extra tiles that can do kind of weird things to the camera. I'm going to take 4 more off of that side, off the right, and we'll take 4 more off the bottom. And now I have a nicely centered little map. So the nice thing about maps when you're drawing, just remember you can kind of draw anywhere. You can always resize the map larger or smaller on any dimension. So you don't have to worry too much about trying to move everything to be centered or resize your map if you like run into an edge and need to still draw stuff. You can always just make your map larger. An interesting thing that AirPig does, because it has an opinionated tiling system, it also means we can automatically generate collision. So all of these yellow boxes are places that the player and characters cannot move. You'll notice that there's no collision on the back sides of walls, so you can overlap or walk under the rear side of walls by 1 tile, and that just gives the maps a sense of depth. The other thing that maps create automatically is navigation mesh. So this is a series of nodes placed in the center of each tile and then connected to all of the surrounding nodes. And bots, NPCs will use this to path through your level. And we'll show a little bit how that works once we start adding things that might impede movement. We recalculate this automatically so that the bots can always path around. But there are a few things to consider for that, so we'll come back to that. For now, I'm going to turn these off and show you the most simple kind of thing you can place into a level, which is just a bare sprite. So we're going to go add a sprite. This automatically scans your sprites folder, so there will be documentation on that. And so it automatically scans and lists all of your sprites here. One thing to note, if you are leaving the editor running, sorry, my voice is hoarse today, so we're just gonna work with it. If you leave the editor running and you're working on sprites and adding sprites, it may not pick those up in real time. So there is a thing here that you can go rescan assets. And so if you have added a sprite and you're not seeing it, you can do that to rescan the sprites folder and look for any new files that it didn't pick up when the editor first loaded. I guess one other thing that I forgot to mention, I should have started with this, is this button here is helpful to see reminders for your editing tips, your shortcut keys. So you can always hit that to bring this up. You can also click Open Documentation Site to go to all of the documentation. So just remember this help icon up here if you run into a problem. Back to editing sprites, we're going to choose a banner. We're just going to put a banner on the wall. And let's go with this red banner right here. It shows you a little preview. For very large sprites, you may only see part of it. We can only fit so much of the sprite in the box. And one other thing to notice, so you can choose the layer here. This is important to understand for map editing. The background layer is under everything. So you would only see this if you've painted background tiles. Where you might use this is, let's say you had a floating island map and your background was supposed to be blue sky. You could actually create cloud sprites or other decoration. Likewise, if you had a water layer and you wanted to place some like rocks in the water or something like that, you can add sprites to the background layer. The ground is fairly self-explanatory. This adds sprites above the path layer, so they will appear over both the ground and the path layers. So you'd use this for sprinkling texture basically to your floors. If I wanted to add little bits of debris or something that I didn't ever want to layer over the player, I could add it to the ground layer. The wall layer is what we're going to use right now. This layer's over walls, but anything walking on the floor will be over it. So you'd use this for things like pictures or this banner we're about to add. The entity layer is special, and we're going to come back to this because that's where we're going to be adding our game entities as well. The entity layer is automatically sorted, and the way that works, because this is a two-dimensional game engine, we want things to move around each other and be able to walk behind and in front, and that uses Y sorting. So Y is up and down, and the higher something is on the screen, the further back it is in our simulated depth. And so things are sorted by their baseline. That's important to understand because it's going to affect how things layer in a lot of places. So we'll be talking about that a few different times as we work on stuff. And the top layer is above walls. The tops of walls have to go on an own layer so that things appear behind them. Actually, I can just demonstrate that right now. So this needs to go behind this layer. And so if I want to put something over the walls, that also applies up here, right? So all these wall tops are on their own layer, and you need that to have a sense of depth and to make it look like the tops of walls are closer to the camera. But the consequence of that is you have to manually place things over that if you want them to layer on top of everything. I've already placed this sprite. I placed it on the entity layer. If I wanted to move it to a layer, so the settings over here are always the instance specific settings, and the settings on the left side are always the general like tool settings. So you notice if I am not clicked on anything, these are empty. If I click on this, oh, I'm on the wrong layer now because I moved it. That's one other thing to notice. You can only select things on the layer that you're editing. So once I have moved that to the top layer, I could no longer click it. Where we actually want this is not, I'm just showing this now layers over everything. We actually want this on the wall layer. So let's move to the wall layer and we'll edit that. That's about all there is to sprites. Sprites are just a raw graphic asset that you're placing directly into a map. You cannot add any behavior to sprites. You can't adjust the clickable area. It's just set to whatever the texture size is of the sprite. So they're good for primitive decor. They're a very cheap kind of asset to add to a map in the sense of computation. So if you wanted like a huge forest, but most of it wasn't interactable, it was just visual, you might want to use sprites instead of like full game objects because they're really cheap. So you could just add sprites to the main entity layer. Once I've placed a sprite, I can press shift to snap it to the nearest pixel while I'm dragging it. That's helpful if you're wanting to line things up. You can turn the grid on and off to align things as well. When I'm clicking sprites, I can press D, and a lot of these shortcuts are the same for everything in the editor. You can press D to duplicate, and then you can press X to flip. And the reason it's X is because we're flipping on the X axis. So just remember that we're mirroring basically on the X axis, and so the key is X. So we have placed two sprites. There's a lot more you can do with sprites. Oh, actually, one more thing I'll show is you can rotate sprites. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I can hold Alt and rotate this sprite. Now in the case of this banner, it doesn't make sense, but let's say you wanted to have like a pile of swords against the wall. I could have a sword over here leaning against the wall. And so it's kind of useful for that. Delete deletes a sprite. And that is sprites. So let's move on to entities, which is one of the main things that you'll be creating in the game. So we've talked about rigs. A rig is the skeleton that provides the animation, and we've gone through a video on that. It has the rig animations. An entity is the word that we use for something that is backed by a rig and placed into the map. That's a little bit confusing, so let's just work through that. So let me place, let's actually place a barrel. So I didn't go over these buttons. These are your main tools. These are map editing tools. These are the rig editing tools, sprite editing tools, and polygon. So we'll be basically working through each of these things. We started with sprites because they're simple, and each thing has an add and an edit button. Most of the things that you add are going to have some ability to filter, so that when you have a lot of game assets, like when we clicked choose a sprite, there's a filter here, so I could filter right to the banners, or I could filter by color. Whatever, it's looking at the sprite name. So how you name your files is important for how easy they are to find while you're working. That applies to sprites and also entities. So when we're placing entities, we can filter. We're going to place a barrel. We'll place a crate, and maybe we'll place a pillar, and we'll call that good. So I mentioned that things are Y sorted. So as I drag this down, you'll see when their baselines cross, they change their sort order. So when the baseline of this rig moves past the baseline of the crate, it will sort behind it. That's going to be important. We'll come back to that. These objects, let me load this rig real quick. So that baseline is this red line. So when you're laying out your rigs, remember that that's what the game is going to consider its sort of front edge of where it's sitting. And anything behind this line will sort behind it. Anything in front will sort in front of it. This barrel is a type of prop. And I don't remember how deeply we covered this, but rigs have a set of behaviors: prop, container, and character. And we're going to review each of those behaviors right now. So props are really simple. They're basically anything that has collision. They can have animations. They can actually have dialogue, and we'll go through that in a little bit. But they're the most simple kind of entity. And props are placed just like sprites. The main difference, or entities in general are placed just like sprites. The main difference is that they have collision and they automatically sort. You cannot place entities up here above the walls or on other layers. And the reason that is because entities may have behavior, they may have pathing, and they all need to be on the same layer for the engine to work properly. I'm just pressing D to duplicate and drag some of these things around. So we're just adding some decor here. Like sprites, I can press X to flip. Oops. So we've added a few things. Now, one other thing is we talked about variants. So if I click these, I can change their variant here. So let's make this an open top. This is a bug that I thought that I had fixed. This will be out of the game soon. This is like a priority bug because it's irritating, but it keeps coming back. So I can have water barrels. So one thing that's worth mentioning is if there are bugs like this, because they do happen, and I am still actively working on this, one thing that you can do to kind of refresh the map is you can just reload it. The map saves constantly every time you do something. So if you just reload the map, usually any visual glitches end up being fixed. So we've changed the variants here to have a couple different kinds. We're going to do the same thing on this pillar. We're going to make this a dungeon variant, and let's just put 2 pillars here. And I named these. You can name these anything, but my color scheme is kind of purple for dungeons, gray for castles, and brown for like man-made buildings or like above ground buildings. So we have kind of a little layout here. Now I want to switch back real quick and talk about the map and nav mesh again, because now that we've placed stuff, you see that it removes nav mesh within a range of the collision footprint of this object. So as I move this around, it's going to change that nav mesh. It does this automatically so that bots can't get stuck trying to path into a pillar, but sometimes you may want to tweak this a little bit. Like if I place this here, it may remove more collision than I want, or I might want it to remove that much because this is overlapping all of these nodes. And I'm actually going to set it up to do that so that bots have a little bit of space to move around here. But this can cause problems. So let me show you an example. You can end up with nodes that are unreachable. And so if the nav mesh turns red, this means that you have nodes that cannot be reached. This can cause pathing problems in the game because a bot might try to navigate to this area. It looks valid programmatically to the engine because there's a node there, but it can't actually navigate there. And I can't automatically purge this because I don't know which part of these nodes are valid. I don't know if you want to keep this and destroy this, or if you want to keep these nodes and destroy those. So I don't destroy detached nodes. I just turn the whole thing red so that you, the editor, can make the best decision on how to fix that. So one way that you can fix nodes is just rearranging your props a little bit. I usually do this as kind of the final pass in the level. I don't really worry about if my node network is good. It's sort of a mental last step for me. After I've placed other collision and I'm done kind of testing everything in the map, I'll even play test for quite a while without doing anything for fixing nodes. One other thing that you can do is once you've placed some things, you can come back and be like, maybe now that I've placed this, I want to have like a little square area like this around these pillars. And maybe I want this to actually look like this. Like these are two pillars and they have kind of a mesh drain around them. So you can turn that on or off. You can also show all of the collision here. This is kind of helpful for debugging. If you do see nav mesh problems, you can see all of your collision and how it's affecting your navigation mesh. So that's props. This is the most simple kind of entity. Let's place a container entity. So we're going to go back to add. I have a container called chest. We're going to just put it right there. So now we have a chest. So far it's acting just like a prop. It doesn't do anything. But a unique thing about containers is you can add things to them. So you'll notice if I click these items, I don't have any inventory option over here. But if I click this one, I have entity inventory. So let's add a crossbow to this. So now if the player interacts with this chest, they'll be able to take a crossbow out of the chest. That's really all there is to containers. They're just a prop that has inventory. So that's the only thing that's really unique about them and how to add inventory to a container. The next thing that we're going to do is add an NPC. So go back to the add here, and I've got a humanoid character. Let's add them. And this is a point where I might say, you know what, I actually want to add a little room back here for this character to be in. So we can hop back here to floor. When I'm map editing, I usually like to have the grid on so we can add a little bit of floor. And oh, my map is now too small. So let's add some tiles to the top. Let's add 12 for now. When I add tiles, they default to being just empty, and so we're going to fill those with wall. That's why you got that line across there. And then we'll just give this guy a little room to be in. Now, I designed my characters to not have any default gender or race or anything like that. And so I just have some skin tone options here. that I've designed in the rig. We covered this a little bit in the variants. And then, okay, so this is a character behavior. So if we actually load this up, let's look at the chest real quick. So this is a container right here. And this is a character. Characters are the most complex, so we're going to be spending a little bit of time on this. The first thing that we probably want to do is give this person some clothes. So there's two different equipment sections. There's their inventory. This is the items that they're carrying. And then there's the equipped items. This is the items that they'll be wearing. And so we separate those because they might be carrying stuff that you want to appear in their shop. So we'll cover that in a minute, which you don't actually want equipped. And then you may have items that you want them to be equipped. So they could have multiple weapons in their inventory, but you want a specific thing equipped. So that's why these are differentiated. It'll also tell you their stats right here based on what you've equipped. So let's give this guy a shirt. Let's give him a green shirt. And shirts don't have any defense, so that didn't change at all. Let's give them some pants. Let's go with some brown pants. And what kind of hair do we want to go with? Do a black beard, black side part. Again, there's no gender here, so you can add whatever kind of is the character look that you want. Notice that both of these appeared in inventory. This is this could cause bugs, so you kind of want to check and make sure you don't have two items that could be equipped to the same bone. What should be happening is that it equips this one and then it equips this one, which unequips the previous one. But there could be some bugs with that. I would try to avoid having multiple things in equipment that can equip to the same bone, because it may be unpredictable which order they get equipped in. Now I have a character that's clothed. I can actually also give them a weapon. So now they're equipped with a weapon. If I want to take something out of their inventory, like the simple short sword, we'll just remove that. So that's how to add and equip an entity. Now let's talk about let's start with dialogues, actually. So if I want them to say something, I can add a new dialogue. And what I do a lot of times is I'll put the character's name. This helps me, because this is what shows in the entity dialogue. This kind of helps me remember what a dialogue is. So let's say this character's name is Marissa. Thanks for finding me. And then set a dialogue sprite. I prefix, again, I'm pretty picky about my naming, so it's easy to find and sort on stuff. So I prefix all of my little dialogue icons with DLG. And we can just use this heart dialogue. If we want to remove it, we can clear that. And so now this character has a dialogue. We can actually add multiple dialogues and they'll play randomly. So let's just say the monsters were really scary. And let's say for this one, we want a little skull dialogue. So when you talk to this character every time, the engine will randomly pick one of these dialogues. If you want to edit a dialogue, you click it and just click the pencil icon. And if you want to delete one, you click the minus symbol. So this will just give this entity random things to say when you talk to them. You can do one to always get the same dialogue. You could do 100 different dialogues if you wanted to have a lot of randomness in what they say. Now let's say that Marissa is a hairstylist. So let's give her a store, and let's say she sells things that have the word hair in them, and she sells anything. She sells 5 items, so she'll have 5 randomly generated items, and she sells things from 0 to $25. That huge number in here was basically just the largest number that can exist in this field, and it just defaults to that to find everything. So this will give her 5 random items on a regular refresh rate that have the word hair in the item title. So again, naming things is important. It's kind of how you find and utilize things throughout the game. So I've spent a little bit of time thinking about what verbs or adjectives do I want to use in my item titles so that I can filter to the right things on in stores. Don't forget also you can suppress items so that they never appear in a store. So if I have like a quest item or something that should only exist once in the game, and the user should not be able to like accidentally buy a quest item from a merchant, you can suppress those. So now she has some dialogue, she has a store. Now there is an order here. It goes store first, then quests, then dialogue. So if they have a store, they won't say dialogue or offer quests. I think that's how it works. It could be quests first. So don't quote me on that. But dialogues are lowest priority. So they are basically flavor content. Anything that is actually attached to game behavior would be a quest. And we're going to come back to quests in a little bit. Entity inventory, if you want a store that has only specific things, you can actually add specific things. Each thing you add to inventory will deduct from the maximum item that you have. So if I put a filter here of hair and I say 5 items, but then I add 5, say, shirts in here, the player will only see the 5 shirts because this is the max inventory that she will have. So basically that overrides the random generation. You could also set this to have 0 items and no filter, and they would only sell the things that you specifically put in their inventory. So if you wanted an NPC to only ever sell 1 legendary sword, and maybe they're hidden somewhere in the game, you could make them a store with no items and no filter, add 1 sword to their inventory, and that should be the only thing that they sell. So that's kind of how that works. Let me see if I'm missing anything else we've talked about. Containers and inventory and equipment. The last thing is quests. And because I don't want to overload too many things at once, actually let's come back to quests. Let's create some polygons, because that's the next thing that we'll need to test. So we'll leave the state. Normally, I would be play testing this already, but because I'm trying to walk through things sequentially and not bounce back and forth, we haven't play tested. So let's talk about what we need to play test and some other features that also tie into entities. So this is the final unique thing that we can add to maps, which is polygons. So if I click polygon and I just add a polygon, by default, this is a collision polygon. So its behavior is collide. We can call this, for example, collision. I recommend naming things so that you remember what they are. And that's all this polygon does. If I show nav mesh, you'll see that this also is restricting the nav mesh because it's collision. So bots cannot walk into this because it's collision. So a way that that's really useful is, let's go back to these, and let's say you have some nodes here that are orphaned like this, but you don't want people to be able to walk here. You can move this collision right here to fix your nav mesh if you don't want to place more entities but just want some custom collision. So now we have custom collision in that corner. The player will not be able to walk in there even if there's like gaps here, and we'll just leave that for testing. By the way, collision automatically turns on the visibility when you're editing polygons, but if you want to be able to see all of your stuff at once, again, you can turn on collision, and then even when you're editing entities, you'll be able to see where that collision edge is if you want to stack stuff along it or whatever. But a lot of times you don't want this on because it's kind of visually distracting. So the first type of collision is or the first type of polygon, sorry, is just collision. The next type we're going to talk about is transitions. Transitions are how you move between maps. And we'll fully wire this up at the end, but for now we're going to use this transition as our player starting spawn. So we're going to call this a transition one, and we'll call this dungeon entrance. Okay, so you can see when I set this as a transition polygon, it gets totally different properties. We can now set a target map. So I could say this takes us to the cellar, a different map. And then if I select this, I can choose which polygon. This takes us to the cellar entrance. Actually, I'll just leave that. If I choose a quest dependency, I can say you cannot go through this transition until you have started the Faden in cellar quest. So that allows you to have doors that are basically locked until a quest is accepted, and then the player is allowed to go through them. I'm going to skip player spawn for now because we're going to come back to that. That's actually what we're trying to create right now. The last thing is you can set a sound effect. So if I wanted like a door opening sound, like a creak sound, like a squeaky hinges or whatever, I could set a sound effect. Just like everything else, you have a filter here, so we can do I have a door? I don't have a door. I think I've been using this wood handling because it's kind of a like wood thump sound. So go ahead and just set that. And this will play this before the map exits. So you'll hear the like door opening sound, and then it'll transition to the new map. Then the next thing we're going to do is actually make this a player spawn. Now that I've set that, we actually have everything we need to play test this level. If I tried to play test it without a player spawn, the game would not know where to create the player. It would actually play test it, but it would start the player up here at the edge of the map and then boot them out of the map. So if you see that happen, that's what's going on. You've tried to play test your map. The game doesn't know where to start you, so it starts you at 0, 0 up here in the corner, and you get stuck there. And it'll just glitch out trying to move you into the map, and then the collision kicks you back out. So that is left there for a reason. It sends you a really clear signal that something is wrong. So we have everything to play test this map. Let's go ahead and try this out. So all we have to do is, actually, let's give our map a name. And do I need, no, I don't need, actually I don't need this. Polygons, I actually didn't cover this. You can drag these nodes around. Oops. Wow. You can hit plus to add nodes, and minus to remove the closest node. So you cannot make them smaller than 3 nodes, because then it wouldn't be a polygon and it would get glitchy. The other, actually one other important thing, you can make concave polygons. I recommend trying to keep your polygons convex. You will get better collision behavior because the game doesn't always know how to collide just the way that collision math works. Something that's right here, it has to break this polygon up into all convex polygons, and it's impossible to do that accurately 100% of the time. So one tip about polygons is try to make them convex when you can. A little bit of concave is okay, but if you have polygons that look like this as collision polygons, oops, this is almost definitely going to behave poorly. It would be better to make a few small collision polygons instead. One other thing is it is invalid to have lines that cross each other. So this polygon is turned red, which is a clear visual signal that the game is going to glitch straight out if you leave it like that. So just couple more things I forgot to cover on polygons. And now we will play test our game. So we've got, some things I test is collision, make sure this is working. So you can see there's invisible collision there, that is working. One other thing, this is listed in the editor shortcuts, I think. Control D for debug turns on debug visualization. So if you have glitches during the gameplay experience, it's a good idea to turn this on, and you can kind of see if like collision isn't hitting, maybe your collision circle isn't aligned correctly. maybe you have a bad polygon, maybe you have bad nav mesh if bots are misbehaving and getting stuck in geometry. So this is a really good way to debug what is going on in the game. When things are moving, it will also show how they're pathing. So you can see if you're like, why can't I walk through here? Oh yeah, I put a polygon there, that's why. So I'm getting stopped by that. So that's a useful feature for playtesting. I'm going to interact with this. Here's the crossbow we placed in here. So that is working correctly. If I go talk to this NPC, oh, we're not going to get her dialogue because she's a store, remember, and she sells hair. So we could buy, let's be a graybeard here. And then I can now equip that. And now I suddenly look older and wiser. So we can't test her dialogues because we made her a shop. So we'll hit escape to exit the playtest. And there's a couple important things to show. Note that it's almost instant to start playtesting. It takes a little bit longer to unload the game, playtest, and restore the editor state back to what it was. So that always takes a few extra seconds. We're going to edit her and just click this minus to destroy her shop configuration. That should allow us to test her dialogue. And then while we're at it, let's make another change. We're going to show the last polygon type. Oh, sorry, not the last, but the next polygon type. So we're just going to give her a navigation. And actually, this will probably get buggy, but let's just make it huge and see what happens. She should be able to path correctly through the level because of the nav mesh. So even if we give her a pretty large zone here. Now, I still have this set to collision. I'm going to change this to patrol area. And we're going to call this friendly NPC patrol. This lets me know that I am using this for friendly NPCs versus bots. Now that I've created that, I can set her, and you can see she has a patrol area, so I can set that to friendly NPC patrol. So the next thing we should be able to test is that we can talk to her, and she has dialogue, and she's going to patrol around this map. So there she goes. And she says, thanks for finding me. That's one of them. Those monsters were really scary. That's the other one. Those monsters were really scary. Thanks for finding me. So she's going to just patrol around the map. Again, I can see on here when she picks a new path, we'll be able to see what she's doing. So you can see she has found a path to a target area. This lighter polygon is her visual cast. So what happened is the bot tried to look to where she wants to go. It was blocked by level geometry. There was a collision there. So she asked the nav mesh, how do I get there? And she was given a path to it. So that's how bots' logic works. They will use the nav mesh until they have line of sight to the place that they're trying to go. And that's used by both friendly and enemy NPC. So if you see bugs, that helps you understand a little bit of how the logic is happening, so you can maybe guess at what is causing your pathing bugs and fix it in the level. It is impossible to build an engine where you can't create pathing problems. And so my goal here is to just give editors plenty of tools to actually see what's going on and be able to fix it in their level design. So all of those features are working. Part of the reason we're bouncing back and forth here, it takes a little bit more time in terms of the video length, but I want to just show the full process and how you regularly play test, edit your experiences one thing at a time as you build up your level. The last thing to show for this character is quests. We're going to go ahead and take her patrol zone away. This is reverted back to none. That's good. We'll move these things back into the corner. Kind of prepare for our next actual thing. Now, actually, one other thing I didn't show. The editor, when you playtest, is saving your game. And that's because you may want that. You may want to give yourself a bunch of test items through a chest and then still have those in your inventory. So if I start right now, I still have the stuff that I got out of that chest. I equipped the crossbow. I already had these in my inventory. It saved that state. I still have the gray beard. So I have a play save. This container is empty. You often will want that, and you also may not want that. And so one of the things that you can do in the editor is destroy your save if you want to get to a fresh testing state. So this makes it kind of a balance between if you want to test, a complex situation where you've like solved 2 quests and you have some stuff in your inventory and you're trying to test a specific thing, you can do that and it'll save your game state. But if you're ever like, I need to destroy that and get back to a fresh state, destroy editor game save will restore all of the map back to how it was. So containers will get their inventory back, and you will start with a fresh character again. So in this case, we want to do a quest. And so we're going to do kind of the final piece that we haven't covered before in a deep dive video, which is quests. And I think it just makes sense to group these with the maps. So let's say this is an item retrieval quest. I would give it a name that's better than that. But let's say she's going to ask for a sword is my plan here. And so the quest sprite, we'll use one of those dialogue sprites. I even have a sword one. This is a fetch quest. Right now, I only support fetch and bounty quests. Bounty are like kill X number of Y, and fetch quests are get object X from Y. I plan to support a lot more quest types, but for now this keeps it simple. The target type, let's say we want, I think I said a dagger here. We want to retrieve one of them, and you must get it from the demo map. Can you please find my dagger? I think I left it in an old chest. That makes no sense, but it's good enough. I'm hoping you can find my dagger. So this is the grant dialogue when you've never talked to them. This is the reminder dialogue of when you've got the quest to remind you what you're trying to do. And then this is the completion dialogue. If I want to, I can set a prerequisite quest. And this allows me to set up quest chains. Quest chains are fairly simple in this. They're fairly linear. But you can set up chains of quests where you have to do thing X and then thing Y. If I want a quest reward, this is the cash reward. And this is the item reward. Excuse me. So let's say she's going to give you, I don't know, she's a hairstylist. She's going to give you a copper bun and $5. That's all there is to creating a quest. Now that I've done that, I can go back to my map, and she should be able to do the item retrieval quest. That is going to override her dialogue, and you'll notice she now has this little particle effect. Just a reminder that if you don't like kind of the art and animations, all of that can be overridden. This was kind of a test of like spitting out these little particles, but I could also create a bone that wiggles back and forth and has a little like exclamation icon or something like that. So you can customize all of that how you want. So she'll now have a quest. I need to actually give the player an item to find. So let's add a simple dagger here. And so now you should be able to fully satisfy this quest. And once the quest is satisfied, we should get back to seeing her default dialogue. So I have now restored to my normal character state. Before I get the dagger, let's go talk to her. And she says, "Can you please find my dagger?" And we got a little note up here that we received a quest. I think I left it in an old chest. We can also look at our journal, which is the J key, and see the reminder. I'm really hoping you can find my dagger. I'm hoping I don't lose my voice before this video ends. So here's what we want. So we've now got that. We talked to her. Thanks for finding my dagger, and that should be removed from our inventory. And we got a copper bun and $5. Let's equip that. Yeah, whole new style. Okay. Oh, one other thing that we're supposed to test here is we need to talk to her and see if she has her regular dialogue. Now we're back to her regular dialogue. Those monsters were really scary, and thanks for finding me. So now you see how to set up NPCs. Let's do the, let's change our quest a little bit, and we'll set up one of the final pieces of the puzzle, which is spawners. While we're waiting for this to unload, everything that you saw with creating a specific type of NPC and giving them a patrol path, right now that was all friendly. So her entity team is friendly. If I did all the same things but made this enemy, that would be a custom monster. So I could create a specific type of monster boss. I could give them a patrol area. I could equip them with custom gear, and they would patrol that area and attack the player when they enter it. All I would have to do that is to change their team from friendly to enemy. Also note that NPCs and enemies will fight if they're on opposing teams. So if you put them to where their patrol paths overlap, your NPCs or enemies will kill each other. We're not going to go through all of that because that's basically the same process. It's just changing the one drop down. Excuse me. Okay, the final thing we're going to test is spawn areas. So we're going to add another polygon here, and I'm going to call this Skelly Spawner. We're going to make this is also a bit of a test because they should not spawn in. Actually, I don't want them to be able to walk over the transition area because that will make that a safe escape. So they should not spawn in geometry. I've had some bugs with that, so we'll see if we have some bugs. They should only spawn in valid nav mesh nodes. Sorry, the reason that is showing up wrong is we have this on collide. So let's change this to spawn. So they should only be able to spawn where there's a valid nav mesh node here. So they never get stuck in geometry, and then they can path to any other node. So this is why it's important to make sure that your whole nav mesh is connected, because if you have splits in your nav mesh, they will try to path to nodes that they may not be able to ever reach, and then they'll just walk into the geometry forever. So I've changed this to a spawn behavior. We're going to make this a humanoid monster. We're going to do the default variant, and the team is enemy. Pre-spawn is how many entities will be always walking around. So if you want the player to not have any idea they're moving into a monster area, you can leave that at 0 and there'll be no monsters. But if you want to give them an indicator of like maybe 2, then that kind of tells them, oh, this is a danger area. Active creatures is how many the spawner will keep active and keep spawning from its total creature pool while the player is colliding with the spawn area. And so let's say we want 5 creatures. So the player walks in, there's 2, then 3 more spawn, so that we turn up the heat a little bit as the player walks in. And let's say the total creatures are 10. So there can be 10 total skeletons. And then we can give them equipment that they will all get. So I have this rusty monster dagger. So this area will have skeletons. Actually, let's move this up a little bit so we don't have skeletons right where we're spawning. That'll just be kind of annoying for testing. And that should be everything we need to have a spawner. So this is spawning two things. I think I have their movement set really slow. Some of the animation and moving timing needs to be tweaked. Those are all things you can easily tweak. If you are testing and want to see again how they're moving and things like that, you can press Control D. We'll move in here, and they immediately move at their full speed to charge me. So heat definitely got turned up a little bit, and they'll keep attacking. I guess I didn't talk about death. So if they do kill me, the default game behavior is that you respawn at the last map transition. So in my case, this was here. So actually, I'll let them kill me. I don't know how many we've killed. So, uh-oh, I died. And now I will respawn after a period of time. That is also all configurable in project settings, which you can look at the documentation for. Right now, there's not really a penalty for death. I have plans to eventually make that configurable. Now, one thing to note, we talked about quests, and we talked about bounty quests being a quest type. I intended to change that quest, and we didn't do it, so I'll just talk through it. Instead of a fetch quest, I could give her a bounty quest and put a number in there like 3 and a target type, so the same type that we just put in this spawner, and a target area, so that's just this map. So her quest would be satisfied if you had killed 3 skeletons in this map, and then I could go talk to her and complete that quest. So that is the other quest type right now, and again, I do have plans to add more types of quests in the future. Excuse me, sorry, I'm losing my voice in this video. There's 2 other things I'm looking at my list that we haven't covered. And this is taking, okay, I was like, did something crash? It took a long time to unload. One is transitions. We didn't actually test that, so we'll do that. The last thing I wanted to show is just how you can kind of override layering. So one of the things that you may want to do is have a lot of varied decor, and you want to maybe change that. So have some flexibility for how that looks. So I'm going to just add a table here. So we have a table. I want a bunch of stuff on this table. Now I could actually build that into the rig. I could go to my horizontal table, and I could add a whole bunch of jars and plates and food or whatever to this table, but then every rig that I placed would have all of that. You could also do it as variants, so you could have a bunch of bones and then swap out the sprites to have different variations of table. Those are totally valid ways to build stuff. But what I like to do is create decor items. So I have, I think I actually, yeah, I just called it decor assorted. And so I can add one of those. I'll actually add a game board as well and a coin pile. These are some different kinds of decor items. Now this piece of decor, I call it assorted because I have kind of a generic collision box. In most cases, this decor collision isn't going to matter. And I have a bunch of different variants. So like I have a plate. We'll duplicate that. I have some cheese, like different kinds of food. So I want to put some stuff on this table. But remember, everything is sorted by baseline. So I move this very far up and it sorts behind because the front of this has crossed the front of the other object. So one of the things you can do is a layering override. And this is a pixel offset. So this basically is telling it, pretend like you're actually positioned more towards the front of the camera than you are. So let's give this like a 16. And now when I drag this back here, I can place this plate on top of this table. Instead of using this, I'm just going to duplicate this because now we already have a layer set up. And you kind of, I would recommend using the smallest number that layers over the table. So it's like, does 12? Okay, 12 is behind, 14, 15. Yeah, we'll just stay with 16. So So we can duplicate this plate, and let's make this a piece of cheese. And actually, let's change this to 17. So we can layer that. And let's duplicate that again. It's okay for that to stay at 17. And let's make this a Stein. And you can flip that just like other stuff. And let's put a little game board down here. We'll put this on top of here. Let's do 12. Oops. Oh, yeah, that wasn't high enough. 16. What am I doing wrong here? Maybe it still wasn't high enough. Let's go 20. There we go. So that is a way, that's like really handy to be able to do, because then you can add a lot of decor to areas. So you can really make your stuff feel a lot more alive. Like let's say I want to put, oh, we got our bug again that I can't seem to get fixed. But I know that that's about the baseline. We'll put a bottle of wine there. And actually for this one, let's add the coin pile and some coins on top of there. So that's how you add a lot of decor. You can build anything like that. Like when I build my houses, I separate the house geometry from like the chimneys and walls and things like that, and I just make those separate and use offsets, and that allows me to composite houses and effects very easily. Let me just reload this map. So yeah, now that wine bottle is fixed. So that was one thing I wanted to show, is just sorting overrides if you want to place things on top of other things. I'll hop over to this Fadden map I've been working on and be able to show you that a little better. So like this house has a window entity, a chimney entity, the house itself. So I can use the same house, like make it different colors. I can, you know, add a door if I want it to have a downward entrance, or if I want it to be facing up, I can add a window. And so I build my units separately. One of the things that I did with this chimney is I actually put the smoke effect as part of the chimney. I'm actually going to separate that out and create a generic smoke effect that has no collision and is only an effect. And that way I can reuse it, because I realize like, oh, the smoke effect is almost exactly the same for chimneys, whether they're vertical orientation or they're horizontal like this one, or they're like this blacksmith forge. I also have this little light effect over these lamps. Well, I might want this oven to emit little light effects. And so I think it's a better idea. You're more flexible if you build your rig sort of independently and then just use the offset to make them layer correctly. That makes your art a lot more flexible and your rigs a lot more flexible to use. So that's just a little pro tip that I've found. One other thing on rigs, you can suppress collision. I don't know that I had added this feature when I made the rig video. So if you want to create an effect only rig that's like just particles or just sounds, like ambient sounds, you can check suppress collision and they won't have any foot collision and they will not collide with the player. And then you can use layering overrides. Like you could actually have an effect that was just like a circling bird, you know, that's just an animation. And so that gives you a lot of flexibility in how you use game entities as well. The last thing that we didn't fully test was a transition. And actually, let's just add one to this map. So we're going to add a polygon here, and I'm going to call this demo transition. And this will just show you the sort of final step. I'll just leave it that size. And we're going to say this transitions to our demo map. Dungeon entrance has no quest dependency. And go ahead and play that wood handling sound effect. obviously this makes no sense that you're walking into a house and like ending up in a dungeon, but it's good enough for testing. And then we'll set this one to go to the Fadden map and the demo transition, and we don't want a quest dependency. So if this is all working correctly, let's go ahead and clear our game save. So we're back to our fresh state. Now notice I spawned in that transition, but it won't trigger again until I leave and come back in. So that way you don't get oscillations where you're like infinitely transitioning back and forth. So hopefully that little sound came through. I did make a mistake, and my transition overlapped with collision, and so it placed the player, it spawned me in collision. So I don't know if that came through in the video, but it kind of glitched out a little bit before the collision shoved me out. That was a map design error, and you can see that because this transition overlaps with collision. So that's the sort of thing where turning on the debug can help you see why something is behaving a certain way. And then we transition back. So I think that covers everything. Let me just do a last quick check. I think we've done, one other very small thing. You can add dialogues to anything, any kind of prop as well. And so I just think this is a cool way to add a lot of flavor to your game. Waiting for this to unload. I may have a slight memory leak that I need to fix when you transition back and forth between maps multiple times. It may not be fully unloading old maps because I've noticed this is getting slightly longer each time. So the last quick thing to demo, let's say that I want to add some just flavor to this little barrel. I can add a new dialogue. Gross. It's filled with dead rats and dust. And pick one of our dialogues. So now we've just added a little bit of flavor to a random object. It's just a prop, but that just adds a little discoverable element to the game. Oh, I wanted to destroy that spawn. So now this barrel has a little bit of flavor. So you can add a lot of flavor to your levels by giving the character things to look at and interact with that don't necessarily have to be mobs or like NPCs. Your character can interact with any type of prop. And there should be a little interaction icon that pops up when you can interact with something. That's currently broken on my animation. But the player will get an indicator if you animate your rig correctly when they can interact, and that'll be that should be in the documentation. So that's just a little content problem I have with this that I need to fix. But that was one last thing that I forgot to show about dialogues, and that is everything that I wanted to show today. So I know this ended up kind of long. And my voice is almost gone, but this is where everything comes together and kind of how you turn all of the features into an actual game. So thank you for watching, and this concludes our alpha deep dive video series.